begins to emerge. Khatri never believed the town was random. He believed it had rules. And if the town has rules, then someone created those rules. But here's what changes everything. What if Khatri wasn't trying to help people escape? What if he was trying to help them understand the purpose of being trapped? That sounds impossible. Until you start connecting every decision he made, every warning he gave, every question he refused to answer directly. Suddenly, his death doesn't feel like a tragic loss. It feels like the town silenced the one person who was getting too close to the truth. And that possibility changes the entire story of From. Because everyone else is searching for a door, Khatri was searching for meaning. Those are two completely different missions. And this is the detail everyone missed. Think about the very first day. What if the only man who truly understood the town died before anyone was willing to believe him? Not Boyd, not Jade, not Victor. Father Khatri. The biggest mistake we've made while watching From is assuming that Khatri was simply the town's moral compass. A priest trying to keep people hopeful. A man whose faith slowly collapsed under impossible circumstances. But that's not what the show was telling us. The real clue wasn't in his sermons. It wasn't in the church. It wasn't even in the voices he claimed to hear. It was hidden in the way he understood the town itself. Because if you go back and watch every conversation Khatri had with Boyd, something disturbing begins to emerge. Khatri never believed the town was random.
Is assuming that Khatri was simply the town's moral compass.
Then someone
a priest trying to keep people hopeful.
But here's what changes
a man whose
everything.
faith slowly
Khatri
collapsed under impossible
escape?
circumstances.
What if he was trying to help them
that's not what the
understand
show
the
was
purpose
telling
of
us.
being trapped?
The real
That
clue
sounds
wasn't in his
impossible.
sermons.
Until
it
you
wasn't
start
in the
connecting
church.
every
It
decision
wasn't even
he
in the
made,
voices he
every
claimed to
warning
hear.
he gave,
It was hidden
every
in the way
question
he understood the
refused to
town
answer
itself.
directly.
Because if you
Suddenly,
go back and
his
watch
death
every
doesn't
conversation
feel like a tragic loss. It feels like the
Khatri had
town
with Boyd,
silenced the one
something
person
disturbing
who's
begins
getting too
to
close
emerge.
to the truth.
Khatri
And that possibility changes the entire story
never believed
of
the
From,
town was random.
because
Is
everyone else
assuming
is
that
searching for
Khatri
rules.
was
And if
simply
the
the town's
rules,
moral compass.
then
Those
someone
a priest
created
trying
those
to keep
rules.
people hopeful.
But here's what
a man
changes
whose
everything
faith
everyone missed. Think about the very first days after Boyd became sheriff. Boyd believed survival depended on action. Build shelters. Protect people. Find food. Search the forest. Create order. Khatri never argued against those things. But he always pulled Boyd back toward another question. Why is this happening? Notice how strange that is. Every other character reacts to the town. Khatri studies it. There's a massive difference. One mindset keeps people alive. The other uncovers secrets. The show quietly keeps rewarding characters who begin observing patterns instead of fighting them. Victor survives because he notices details. Jade discovers clues because he becomes obsessed with symbols. Tabitha finds impossible places because she follows strange connections instead of logic. Even Ethan constantly asks questions adults ignore. Observation always reveals something. Reaction almost never does. Now place Khatri inside that pattern. He wasn't obsessed with escape. He was obsessed with understanding. That alone should make us question everything we thought about him. Because look at what the show is actually telling us. Every character who tries to force the town into making sense fails. Jim uses science. Jade uses mathematics. Randall uses violence. Others rely entirely on faith or hope. Each approach works only for a short time. The town always pushes back, almost as if it's testing them, testing whether they're asking the right questions. And Khatri may have been the first person to realize that. Not because he had supernatural powers, but because he understood something about human nature. Faith isn't believing without evidence. Real faith is continuing to search when the evidence makes no sense. That's exactly what Khatri does. He never pretends everything is fine. He never tells people the monsters aren't real. He never ignores the suffering. Instead, he treats every terrible event as if it's pointing toward something larger. That's an unusual way to think inside a place built on fear. Most people see chaos. Khatri sees intention. And if there's intention, then there must also be intelligence. That single idea completely changes how we view the town. Because now the monsters stop being the main mystery. They're just one part of a much larger system. The real mystery becomes the system itself. Who designed it? Why does it repeat? Why are people chosen? Why do symbols appear before disasters? Why do certain people receive visions while others never experience anything unusual? Those aren't random events anymore. They're connected. And Khatri seemed to understand that long before anyone else. Remember how calm he often appeared, even during moments that terrified everyone around him? Many viewers interpreted that as religious faith. But maybe that's only half the answer. Maybe he stayed calm because he realized panic only helps the town. Fear clouds judgment. Fear breaks communities. Fear isolates people. Every time fear spreads, the town becomes stronger. Look carefully at what happens after every major tragedy. People stop trusting one another. Arguments begin. Paranoia grows. Hope disappears. It's almost as if emotional collapse is part of the town's design. And Khatri constantly fought against that invisible enemy. Not the monsters. The fear behind the monsters. That's a completely different battle. And this is where it gets darker. If fear is the town's real weapon, then Khatri's faith wasn't just religion. It was resistance. Every sermon, every conversation, every attempt to unite people, every moment he convinced someone not to give up. Those weren't comforting speeches. They were acts of rebellion. Because a united town becomes harder to manipulate. A hopeful community becomes harder to control. Someone or something doesn't want that to happen, which raises a terrifying possibility. Was Khatri accidentally disrupting the town's true purpose? And if he was, did the town decide he had to die? Because once you start viewing his story through that lens, his death no longer feels random. It feels calculated. And the clues only become more disturbing when we examine the final conversations he had with Boyd. Khatri's final conversations with Boyd sound completely different once you stop hearing them as advice from a priest and start hearing them as warnings from someone who had begun to understand the town's design. Boyd believed the town was an enemy that could eventually be beaten. Khatri never said Boyd was wrong, but he kept pushing him toward a different realization. Winning and understanding are not the same thing. That difference is easy to miss the first time you watch the show. Boyd constantly focuses on solving the crisis directly. Every new danger demands an immediate response. Someone is trapped. Someone is injured. The monsters are coming. Food is running out. Every decision becomes about surviving one more day. Khatri always seems willing to step back from the emergency. Why? Because he understood that emergencies end. Patterns don't. And that's not the real mystery. The real mystery is why the same emotional cycles keep repeating no matter who arrives in town. Every new group experiences hope, then confusion, then fear, then conflict, then loss, then desperation. The names change, the faces change, but the emotional journey almost never changes. That cannot be an accident. Look at what the show is actually telling us. The town doesn't simply trap bodies. It traps behavior. Almost everyone eventually makes the same mistakes. People begin keeping secrets. Communities split apart. Trust disappears. Someone believes they alone have the answer. Someone ignores a warning. Someone acts out of fear. Then another tragedy follows. It is almost like watching an experiment repeat itself over and over. And if that's true, Khatri was one of the first people trying to break the cycle instead of simply surviving inside it. This is the detail everyone missed. Whenever Khatri tried to help someone, he rarely offered practical instructions first. He asked questions. He listened. He wanted people to confront what they were carrying long before they confronted the monsters outside. Why would that matter? Because the town seems strangely interested in emotional wounds. Think about the people who receive visions. They are rarely emotionally stable. Tabitha begins seeing impossible things after deep personal grief. Jade's obsession grows stronger as his mind begins to fracture under pressure. Sarah hears voices that exploit her fears and guilt. Elgin experiences disturbing dreams that blur reality. Boyd's visions become more intense after overwhelming trauma. The pattern keeps repeating. The town doesn't create emotional weakness. It discovers it. Then it amplifies it. That changes everything. What if every supernatural event is built on a person's unresolved pain? Suddenly, Khatri's role becomes much larger. As a priest, his entire life before arriving in town revolved around guilt, confession, forgiveness, and healing invisible wounds. Those are exactly the areas where the town seems strongest, almost as if his real skills were never spiritual rituals. His real skill was preventing people from becoming vulnerable to whatever controls this place. And this is where it gets darker. Notice how often the town attacks people after moments of emotional collapse. When hope disappears, strange things begin happening. When someone loses faith in themselves, the whispers become louder. When guilt becomes unbearable, impossible visions appear. The supernatural almost behaves like a predator waiting for psychological weakness. That's an unsettling idea, because it suggests the monsters are not independent hunters. They're symptoms. The real hunter may be the town itself. Think about the creatures for a moment. Everyone fears them because they kill, but killing may not be their primary purpose. If simple death were the goal, the town could wipe everyone out in a single night. Instead, the monsters stalk. They smile. They talk softly. They tempt. They manipulate. They wait. They exploit mistakes. They force impossible choices. That behavior feels deliberate, almost theatrical. Almost like someone wants every victim to experience fear before death. Fear is always the first objective. Death comes second. Now remember how Khatri constantly tried to reduce panic inside Colony House and the town. He encouraged unity. He encouraged forgiveness. He encouraged people not to surrender to hopelessness. At first, those scenes feel like ordinary leadership. Now they look like resistance against the town's greatest weapon. Every calm conversation delayed chaos. Every restored relationship weakened isolation. Every act of forgiveness interrupted the emotional cycle the town seemed to depend on. But here's what changes everything. What if Khatri never fully understood who was controlling the system? Only how the system worked. That would explain why he never gave Boyd a complete answer. He didn't have one. He had pieces. Enough to recognize the pattern. Not enough to see the architect behind it. And that's exactly where Jade enters the story. Everyone assumes Jade is discovering things Khatri never knew. But what if they're solving different halves of the same puzzle? Jade investigates symbols. Khatri investigated people. Jade studies the structure. Khatri studied the purpose. One searched for the mechanism. The other searched for the meaning. Separate, their theories are incomplete. Together, they begin revealing something terrifying. The town is not simply a prison. It behaves like a machine designed to transform human beings through fear, guilt, hope, sacrifice, and choice. The symbols explain how the machine operates. Khatri's philosophy explains why it operates. And if that's true, then Khatri wasn't behind the investigation. He was years ahead of it. His death didn't stop the mystery. It left the survivors trying to solve it without the one person who had already recognized the rules. Which leads to an even more disturbing question. If Khatri was right about the town from the very beginning, then what terrifying truth was he only one step away from discovering before the town made sure he would never speak again? If Khatri was only one step away from the truth, then his death wasn't just another tragedy. It was the town protecting its greatest secret. And once you accept that possibility, nearly every major event in From starts pointing in the same direction. Because throughout the series, the town behaves less like a haunted place and more like an intelligent system. It reacts. It adapts. It redirects people when they get too close to answers. Whenever someone uncovers a clue, another mystery appears. Whenever someone finds hope, something devastating happens. It's as if the town constantly maintains a balance. Not enough hope for people to escape. Not enough despair for everyone to give up. Just enough of both to keep the cycle alive. That doesn't sound random. It sounds controlled. And Khatri may have recognized that before anyone else. Look at what the show is actually telling us. Victor survived for decades not because he was stronger than everyone else, but because he learned to live within the town's rules. Jade keeps finding symbols because his mind naturally searches for patterns. Tabitha discovers hidden places because she follows impossible paths instead of obvious ones. Boyd keeps surviving because he refuses to stop fighting. Each character represents a different way of confronting the town. But Khatri represented something entirely different. Acceptance without surrender. That's an important distinction. He never accepted that the town was good. He accepted that it had a purpose. Those are not the same thing. And this is where it gets darker. What if the town isn't trying to destroy humanity? What if it's trying to judge it? That idea sounds extreme until you notice how often characters are forced into impossible moral decisions.
Who do you save?
Who do you sacrifice? Do you tell the truth or protect someone's hope? Do you risk everyone for one person? Do you hold onto your humanity, even when survival demands something darker? Again and again, the town creates situations where there is no perfect answer. What if the only man who truly understood the town died before anyone was willing to believe him? Not Boyd, not Jade, not Victor. Father Khatri. The biggest mistake we've made while watching From is assuming that Khatri was simply the town's moral compass. A priest trying to keep people hopeful. A man whose faith slowly collapsed under impossible circumstances. But that's not what the show was telling us. The real clue wasn't in his sermons. It wasn't in the church. It wasn't even in the voices he claimed to hear. It was hidden in the way he understood the town itself. Because if you go back and watch every conversation Khatri had with Boyd, something disturbing begins to emerge. Khatri never believed the town was random. He believed it had rules. And if the town has rules, then someone created those rules. But here's what changes everything. What if Khatri wasn't trying to help people escape? What if he was trying to help them understand the purpose of being trapped? That sounds impossible. Until you start connecting every decision he made. Every warning he gave. Every question he refused to answer directly. Suddenly, his death doesn't feel like a tragic loss. It feels like the town silenced the one person who was getting too close to the truth. And that possibility changes the entire story of From. Because everyone else is searching for a door. Khatri was searching for meaning. Those are two completely different missions. And this is the detail everyone missed. Think about the very first days after Boyd became sheriff. Boyd believed survival depended on action. Build shelters. Protect people. Find food. Search the forest.